It's not a threat. I was really hurt by you and your friends, you know. I'm saying I'll forgive it for the price of a meal. So just leave your wallet and go. I realized that the apology was a lie after all. Not just Susan, but Bob also said with a mocking smile. This was their intention from the beginning. We sighed as we watched the two of them rant. Come on, just leave your wallet and go. You know what'll happen if you talk about this, right? Bob is in a higher position than Mike, you know. At those words, I smiled. If they're going that route, there's no need to hold back. Fine, but are you sure about this? You're gonna regret it. Thinking I was bluffing, the two burst out laughing and said, like we care. I took out my wallet and placed it on the table. Seeing that, the two mocked me, saying, thanks. We'll give the wallet to Mike later. Thanks for the treat. Mike clenched his fist in anger, but I held him back and left the room, ignoring the two. Immediately after, we took action. You'll be the ones regretting this. I'm Catherine, and I currently enjoy a peaceful life with my husband Mike and our son John. Mike and I met in college and grew closer through group projects. Sharing the same hobbies, we soon started dating. After graduating and working for 3 years, we got married. A few years later, we were blessed with our son. Mike works in IT sales and is highly respected at his company, but I know he struggled in his early days. He overcame those challenges, and I admire him a lot. His decision to go into sales was influenced by his family business. His father was involved in the management of a company, and Mike aspires to be like him. I still get tough feedback, but I want to be like Dad, he says. I remember getting a lot of support from my in-laws when John was born. My mother-in-law, a culinary school graduate, currently works as the hostess at a renowned restaurant. Her husband handles the business side. Their motto is, do your best at whatever you think of at that moment. I've always had a fondness for design, and alongside my administrative job, I would draw as a hobby. This hobby paid off over time. As I began to take on freelance web design projects, the scale of the projects gradually increased. Then one day, Mike approached me with a proposition. Hey Catherine, it looks like the company needs a designer. Want to give it a shot? They've got a few other prospects, but I really love your designs. It might get a bit busy, but I'll help out. What do you think, Catherine? There's a warmth in your designs. You should try it. Initially, I was hesitant, but my father-in-law, who happened to be visiting, agreed with Mike. Bolstered by their support, I decided to conceptualize a design. Once I committed, I was driven to excel. I researched the product and brainstormed with Mike to figure out the best design approach. Though it took some time, I finally crafted a design I was proud of. To my gratitude, my design was chosen. The product performed exceptionally well in sales, and both Mike and I were elated upon hearing the news. We expressed our gratitude to my in-laws for their unwavering support, and they were thrilled, as if they had achieved the success themselves. Catherine, it's incredible. Your design made such a difference. Oh, it's nothing really. Having this experience means a lot, thank you. With this success, I began investing more time in web design, which had started as a side gig. Eventually, my earnings from design matched those from my day job, prompting me to quit my administrative position and become a full-time freelancer. Thanks to opportunities with Mike's company, I also get to design whenever they launch new products. Our son John, now in middle school, has grown into a bright and kind-hearted boy who's passionate about playing soccer in his school club. Life is good, but there's one thing that bothers me. Oh, Catherine, is that you? Hello. Oh, Susan, hi. It's about Susan. Her son Jake is in the same soccer club as John. John and Jake have become close friends, often hanging out together on weekends. They even ended up in the same class this year. John speaks highly of Jake, and I was pleased to see him have such a good friend. However, Susan can be quite overbearing. I first met Susan during the school's open house. It was obvious to me from the start that she doted on Jake. Jake, you are definitely Mama's pride and joy. Mom, stop, it's embarrassing. It's fine. As the class resumed, parents mingled with students during the break. That's when Susan's loud exclamation caught everyone's attention. Jake turned red and dismissively shook his head. I initially thought she seemed like a loving mother, but I soon realized there was more to her demeanor. Really, Jake is by far the best. The others seemed to be just playing around during their presentation. The classroom fell momentarily silent at her words. Jake frowned slightly and retorted, "Didn't I tell you to stop it?" Everyone took their presentation seriously. I couldn't help but stare at her, wondering if her comment was appropriate. Eventually, the parents had to leave for another meeting, so they began to exit the classroom. Mom. John, you did well in your presentation. You have club activities today, right? Yeah. Do your best. I'm gonna make your favorite hamburger steak for dinner. Really? Awesome. Just before leaving the classroom, John cheerfully spoke with his mother. Other kids told him, "Lucky you, getting hamburger steak." I felt relieved seeing him handle the situation smoothly. The parent-teacher meeting was open seating, and we were told we could sit anywhere. I chose a seat towards the corner. That's when Susan approached and started talking to me. "Aren't you John's mother?" Huh? I was taken aback by this sudden conversation, but she ignored my surprise and plopped down beside me. "I wanted to meet you. I'm Susan." Despite feeling a bit cornered, I listened to her. How does she know I was John's mother when we hadn't met before? Noticing my confusion, she continued. "You were talking about dinner with John earlier, right? That's how I knew. And calling hamburger steak a treat seems so laid back." I was taken aback by her words. Why was she criticizing our dinner choice, especially since we had just met? "John loves hamburger steak, and I don't think it's your place to comment," I replied. Whether she liked my response or not, she clearly looked displeased. "Well, that's true. My husband works at a major company, so he doesn't quite get the ordinary tastes." "What company does your husband work for?" I didn't feel like engaging with her, so I just brushed her off. Luckily, the meeting started and things settled down. But right after, she asked me, "Wanna grab some coffee or something?" I tried to decline a few times, but she'd insisted, "Come on, it's just some mom friends bonding. Besides, Jake and John are good friends." Left with little choice, I reluctantly agreed. We exchanged contact information and went for coffee before heading home. During our chat, she boasted about her affluent lifestyle and her husband's career. Despite my reservations, she continued to invite me for coffee several times a month, leveraging our kids' friendship. One time, when I declined, she casually mentioned, "My husband knows a lot of people, including John's club coach." It felt like a veiled threat, so I reluctantly maintained a friendship with Susan. What shocked me further was discovering that Susan's husband worked at the same company as Mike. I remember nearly spitting out my drink in surprise when I found out. She had mentioned it was a major company but never specified which one. I hadn't imagined it would be the same one Mike worked for. I learned this during one of her visits to my home. Jake had come over to play, and Susan entered without invitation since our kids were together. "Isn't your husband working for XYZ Corporation, Catherine?" As she said this, I nearly choked on my tea. Seeing my shocked face, Susan seemed pleased, and I had a sinking feeling about where this was headed. "Why?" "Because I saw a business card in your room with your husband's name on it, and I recognized the company name." "Hold on, are you saying you just went into her room?" "No, I didn't mean to. I was just looking for the bathroom and happened to open the wrong door." I was genuinely relieved my sons weren't around to hear this. I had given Susan directions to the restroom, so I initially suspected she was lying. But I had only verbally directed her, so I couldn't push back too hard. Indeed, in Mike's room, he keeps business cards for work. Since I designed various types of business cards for his company, some were displayed under a desk protector. She must have seen those. Stunned and speechless, I stood there as Susan approached and said something. "I really don't like you." Her friendly demeanor had vanished, replaced by a sharp, piercing glare. "Do you enjoy taking work away from other people's husbands?" "Excuse me." Not understanding Susan's implication, I was left bewildered. She threw out one last barb. "Well, whatever. Just remember, I'm gonna make sure you regret this." I was at a loss for words and later recounted everything to Mike. "So Bob's wife is Catherine's friend?" "It seems so. It must be a coincidence, but she seemed to have some sort of grudge against us." "Who's this Bob guy?" After a moment's thought, Mike took a deep breath and began to explain. "I don't think it's good to discuss such things, but Bob is in the planning department. He's quite assertive and..." From Mike's explanation, it became clear that the product planning department collaborated closely with the sales team to drive revenue. Bob, a prominent figure in product planning, held a significant position and was known for his strong belief in meritocracy. His influence was such that outcomes often hinged on his passionate support for initiatives. "He's quite the meritocrat. Some say it's make or break working with him." "I see, but I still don't understand why Susan has such animosity toward us." Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't have a close relationship with Bob. Sorry for getting you involved in this mess. It's fine, but what about John and Jake? It's not ideal for the kids to be close while their parents are in this situation. Yeah, I'll try to find out more about it. Thanks. A few days later, Susan reached out. Feeling apprehensive, I answered her call, and she sounded noticeably more apologetic than usual. I'm so sorry about the other day. I was just stressed about my husband's work not going well. Deciding to give her a chance, I listened as she explained her concerns. She apologized and suggested that we try to get along since our husbands worked at the same company. So, how about we all go out for dinner? Despite my reservations due to her past behavior, I considered our children's friendship and agreed to give her another chance. That's fine. Thank you. I'll arrange the place and let you know the details later. She sounded pleased as she ended the call. The day arrived, and we headed to the restaurant Susan had chosen, a fancy seafood place. However, after waiting for a while, there was no sign of Susan and her husband. Concerned, I tried calling her. When I mentioned my name to the receptionist, their expression turned serious. I'm sorry, but the reservation is only for 2 people. What? Mike and I exchanged puzzled looks. What was going on? Asking the staff member to wait, I immediately called Susan. Hello, Susan. The restaurant just told me the reservation is for 2 people. She laughed and assured us to wait a moment. Soon enough, Susan and a man appeared. Mike greeted him warmly. Bob, good to see you. It dawned on me then that the man was Bob. Susan and Bob grinned widely as they approached us. I had a sinking feeling. I'm sorry, I made a mistake with the reservation. Susan's casual demeanor grated on me. Then she dropped a bombshell. Well, mistakes happen, but let's not waste the food, right? What do you mean? Listen, Mike, I'm going to be heading the planning department soon. You're doing well in sales, but you're still a newcomer. If you don't want things to go sour, you might want to listen to what I have to say. Are you threatening us? It's not a threat. Catherine and you have hurt me deeply. I'm offering you a way to make amends. Just leave your wallet and go. I realized then that her apology was insincere from the start. This was their plan all along. Mike and I sighed in resignation as we watched the 2 of them confront us. Look, just leave your wallet and get out. By the way, you do know what will happen if you tell anyone about this, right? Bob's higher up than Mike after all. I couldn't suppress a smirk. If they were playing hardball, there was no need for restraint anymore. Sure, but are you sure about this? You might regret it. They scoffed, thinking I was bluffing before bursting into laughter. Like we care. I calmly placed my wallet on the table, their mocking laughter egging me on. We'll return Mike's wallet later. Thanks for the generosity. Mike seethed, fists clenched, but I motioned for him to stand down. Ignoring their taunts, I exited the room, ready to take action. They'll regret crossing us. Yeah, can't let them get away with this. Soon after, my phone rang. Recognizing the number, I answered with a satisfied grin. Catherine, looks like we're wrapping things up here. I handed the phone to Mike, who took it with a nod, his expression resolute. After a brief exchange, Mike hung up. Well, shall we head over? Looks like things are getting interesting, I remarked. Mike appeared visibly upset as we made our way back to the restaurant Susan had chosen. Upon arrival, we requested the waiter to summon the owner. Soon after, Mike's mother, who also happened to be the landlady, hurried out. Thank you for your assistance. I apologize for the trouble, Mike said. It's no trouble at all. People like them need to learn a lesson, his mother-in-law replied tersely, mirroring Mike's earlier anger. We were ushered into a room where a tense atmosphere awaited us. Inside were Susan, Bob, and several senior officials from Mike's company, including his father-in-law. How did it come to this? It was simple. The restaurant Susan had chosen happened to be owned by Mike's mom. We realized this when Susan suggested we meet there. It was an unexpected coincidence, but since we were going there anyway, Mike decided to inform his mother. That's when we discovered Susan had only made a reservation for 2. Despite knowing this, we played along. Upon understanding Susan's intentions, we immediately informed Mike's mother-in-law, who, being straightforward, relayed that information to Mike's father. This sequence of events led to the current confrontation. Bob, what's going on here? Mr. Young, a senior figure from the planning department, demanded. Well, it's, Bob stammered. No excuses. Just tell us everything, Mr. Young interrupted firmly. Bob looked flustered, and it was understandable. Mr. Young was a prominent figure in the company's top management, accompanied by a senior from the sales department. My father-in-law, the former CEO, likely summoned them. His reaction was predictable upon learning that his family had been mistreated, especially in his wife's own restaurant by individuals associated with his former leadership. Yes, my father-in-law used to lead Mike's company as CEO. Though retired, he remained well connected within the company. Upon hearing the incident from my mother-in-law, he promptly intervened, contacting the company to clarify the situation. When the CEO learns of employees misusing their positions for extortion, he acts swiftly. The two culprits, unaware of this background, were taken aback by the sudden arrival of company executives at the restaurant, struggling to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Mike indicated I should address this. Yes, I'm here because my husband frequently collaborates with Mike, I interjected calmly. Even now, their blatant lies astound me. They show no remorse, seemingly oblivious to the inevitability of their deceit being exposed. Just then, Mike entered the room, cutting off Bob. Excuse me, Mike said politely to the astonishment of Susan and Bob. You, Bob glared at Mike upon spotting him. While we grasped the situation fully, it was undoubtedly confusing for Susan and Bob. Before Bob could react, my father-in-law intervened. I'm the former CEO, George. I'm retired now and have passed the reins to Mr. Young here. By the way, Mike is my son, but his employment at the company had nothing to do with my influence. I wasn't involved in his hiring at all. Also, this restaurant is owned and managed by my wife. As my father-in-law George explained, Susan and Bob finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, their faces draining of color. Susan let out a nearly soundless sigh, while Bob visibly trembled. Oh no, Susan muttered, looking utterly disconcerted. Enough small talk. Let's focus on the matter at hand, George continued, his tone firm. The discussion that followed was intense, with Susan and Bob struggling to articulate their defense. Susan's animosity towards me appeared rooted in a professional rivalry over a design project at the company. According to Mike's proposal, Susan had been another contender considered for the project. Ultimately, my design had been chosen through a fair evaluation process that involved searching beyond immediate connections for talented designers, thereby enhancing Mike's reputation. Furthermore, despite his relative youth, Mike had developed effective sales strategies, earning the trust of his colleagues and significantly contributing to the company's success. It irritated me that he was taking credit for accomplishments that he'd achieved with the help of his wife's talents. I personally believe Mike has been genuinely diligent, but didn't you feel the same when you sought advice from him? Bob was left speechless, compounded by a cutting remark from a senior executive in the planning department. He harbored resentment because the sales team consistently provided detailed advice to the planning department after completing their tasks, which made Bob feel overshadowed by Mike's contributions. As Mike continued to impress with his responses, Bob's frustration mounted, leading him to frequently vent to Susan. Then one day, Susan overheard me discussing my work with other mothers. I have a passion for design and often create illustrations for school events like PTA meetings. Some of the moms knew I worked freelance, so when Susan discovered I was the chosen designer for the company project, she began targeting me. When we heard this, we were left speechless. It was astounding that jealousy had driven them to conceive such a scheme. To add to the shock, we uncovered another truth. I'm really disappointed in you, Mr. Young admonished sternly. Please wait, I'm truly sorry about this, Bob pleaded. As Bob begged for forgiveness, Mr. Young's voice turned cold. I've heard from our planning department that there's a significant amount of money being spent on planning. Is all of it really going towards actual products? Bob froze, and Susan turned pale. It appeared Bob had been diverting funds under the guise of planning expenses. This revelation surprised us all, revealing Susan's involvement in the scheme as well. How did you get caught? You assured me it would be kept quiet, Susan snapped nervously. I don't know, Bob retorted angrily. His face betrayed guilt, unwittingly confessing to embezzlement. Mr. Young sighed, lowering his head to address my father-in-law. I'm deeply sorry. I never anticipated such misconduct in the company entrusted to me by Mr. George. It's a failure of my oversight. No, Mr. Young, it's not your fault, nor that of the senior staff in sales and marketing. It's this couple resorting to underhanded tactics. They will face consequences, my father-in-law declared firmly. Wait, she's the mastermind, Bob pointed accusingly. Excuse me, Weren't you the one who suggested we embezzle? Susan shot back. Keep your voice down. We're in public, Bob hissed. Shut up. If you hadn't interfered. Don't act righteous when you're complicit. Well, if the husband behaves like this, it's no surprise the wife. The heated exchange devolved into accusations and recriminations, echoing through the store. In the end, Mr. Young turned the arguing couple over to the police, a necessary step given their embezzlement. Though it caused a scene and inconvenience at the store, my mother-in-law managed the situation with grace, swiftly restoring order. From Mike, I learned that Bob was fired from the company and faced legal action for damages, a stern response reflecting the seriousness of misusing company resources. Susan's parents took in Jake temporarily, and they later apologized for their daughter's actions. It seemed the couple chose a life of seclusion afterward, perhaps as a form of penance. Witnessing Susan's parents' sincerity left me pondering how things had unfolded for them. Concerned for Jake, I was relieved that the company ensured the incident remained confidential, sparing him from any schoolyard gossip. He seemed resilient, more upset with his parents than anything else. It's unfortunate about Jake. I spoke to John recently, and it seems Jake is doing well at school. He's a good kid, and everyone trusts him. Despite his parents, he seems to be holding up. I mentioned to my spouse. That's a relief, they replied. Since the incident, I haven't crossed paths with Susan and Bob. However, Jake still visits John and occasionally joins us at home. Watching their joyful play, I find myself hoping they avoid the hardships we faced. We were fortunate this time, but I've come to believe that our daily actions shape the people and opportunities in our lives. I'm more determined than ever to cherish my relationships and make each day count.